You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
So welcome, everybody. This is I Love You Keep Going. It is Thursday, July 3rd, 2025 at 7:37 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And I thought that I would talk about attachment conditioning or attachment disturbances and how they tend to manifest in people, partly because it's interesting to be able to understand your own conditioning, but also the conditioning of other people and how it shows up. We all see ourselves not as we are particularly, but as is reflected back to us. And we create these working models. Actually, it's as gists is the word, these little memory events that are encoded and then associated with the working model, so that when we want to create a sense of ourselves or a sense of someone else, we bring up this pattern, the gists fire, and then we recognize in our sensing experience the pattern of what that is. Human beings are not great at self-reflection. You may have encountered people along the way whose idea of themselves and who they seem to be don't match that well. You might even say that about all of us at certain moments in time. What we think is happening isn't really happening, but it seems vivid and real. We're a little bumble of joy. I've always liked that phrase, bumble of joy. It's from Edward Albee's work. That little activity that we are certainly conditioned to believe is a wonderful experience, being a mother or a father. Some of us have actually done it. And the idea that you're always joyful, always delighting in the child seems to be mysterious. There you are, this expressive being that just is showing the world who you are, and the world being your caregiver, and how they show up is then reflected back to you. And we gradually develop this sense of who we are and what to expect from the world based on that reflection. And if we had a resource caregiver who was responsive, who delighted in us, that's what they reflected back to us. And we developed a sense of ourselves as someone who could be expressive in the world of what we needed, and that the world would then be responsive to that. And so what you notice in secure people is that they tend to be able to touch into themselves and understand what it is that they need, and then they tend to be expressive of that because their expectation is that their needs will be provided for. This, of course, doesn't seem to shake out so well for insecure and disorganized people. They have a different experience. Somebody who grows up to be a dismissing adult will have the experience in childhood of a caregiver who's not responsive, but consistently not responsive, so that you don't develop an expectation that somebody will be responsive. But they also are demanding of you presenting yourself in a certain way. Usually it's an idealized version, but not an idealized version of yourself. What they want you to do is reflect back an ideal version of the parent, of the caregiver. And so you learn to do that. So you're idealizing. You can present well. Preoccupied people, it's a sense that you present yourself to the world in hopes of getting care, but then the care is unreliable. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's the completely wrong thing. And so you don't really track how it is that you present so much as you keep presenting, hoping something will cause a response from the caregivers that will meet your needs. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Often it doesn't. And then disorganized kids are frightened of their caregiver, either because the caregiver is so frightened of the burden of child care, or the caregiver is actually harming. We have these three modes, the attachment system, the exploration system, and then the collaborative relationship system. When the attachment system is active, it causes us to seek physical proximity to somebody who we think will protect us, comfort us, soothe us. And when it settles, it then activates the exploration system, where we can go out into the world and look for the things that have meaning to us and come into a place of meaning with it. We can explore. The collaborative relationship system stays on for the most part, but of course it has to be trained. We come into the world kind of like a tabula rasa, just a warren of unconnected axons waiting to absorb the experience of life as it unfolds. And so that experience of the caregiver is providing that for us. What do they expose us to? What do we learn? Did you have one of those parents that insisted that you eat a variety of vegetables so that at the end of childhood, when the brain reorganizes around cognitive speed and not the capacity to absorb information, did you have a wide range in your palate, or was it confined? The back and forth. So in that early period, that first 3 years, of course, nobody really remembers the first 3 years of life. You develop this orientation, who you think you are, based on a working model of self that is built around the encoding of all of these experiences you had, all of which includes the expectation of what might happen. And then you hit mid-childhood, the birth, in some sense, or the activation of the autobiographical memory. You're already oriented attachment-wise by the time you get there. And then what we begin to do, using the Buddhist idiom, fixate our sense of self and fixate our expectation of the world. Part of that is a luck of the draw. When you showed up on the playground and presented yourself in the full glory of your attachment conditioning, did you meet people who were delighted by that and embraced you? Or did you find it difficult to fit in? Or did you not make much of an impression? What do you remember? I remember quite distinctly coming up the stairs at Lincoln School when I was 5 or 6, and saying to my mother that I wish that she had sent me to kindergarten, but she had sent me to kindergarten. I just didn't remember going to kindergarten because she sent me at 4 instead of 5. So I sort of remember a little bit of first grade when I was 5. But I remember second grade when I was older. 7, maybe. What is that? 6 or 7. I was always a year behind. I didn't catch up until I was a sophomore in high school. This is not a good thing, incidentally, if you're considering to do this to a child, because they're always behind. And so it gives them the impression that they're not coordinated physically and can't think very well, because everybody's better coordinated and can think faster. you follow me on this, you get conditioned and you get to the playground with your underlying basic conditioning. And then depending on how well you can navigate that and how much help you had in navigating that, you develop that autobiographically oriented view of who you are and what to expect from the world. Would it?
Hey, George, you said about better coordination and thinking faster. I was curious about this, the intelligence. Why isn't like that aspect of intelligence thinking faster? Is that related to the attachment system? Why are some kids poor versus not academically?
Oh, well, there's a whole range of learning capacities, and our educational systems, particularly uh, in this country, uh, are organized around certain, well, was supposed to be a meritocracy, right? Gifted kids getting the resources that they need to develop. But it was based on a certain kind of testing. And so what really happened is, rather than it being a means for transversing the class system, it really embedded and reinforced the class system based on a certain kind of learning, which actually is kids who are good at taking a certain kind of test. It's not even all tests, but in this country, the IQ tests are actually not IQ tests. They don't measure IQ. They measure your ability to take that test, which is an unfortunate thing. And then the educational system is based on fast tracking the kids that can take the test well, and everybody else going into a different kind of track. And so I wouldn't be able to reasonably answer the question. The kids that can do well taking that test tend to be moved quicker. And the kids that don't do well taking that test are denied the resources that might make them learn in a way that would be useful. So in our education system, for instance, it doesn't, your capacity for vocabulary doesn't improve beyond what you hear at the dinner table at night. So it really has almost no impact on changing the orientation of the education level of the family. But it is a justification for organizing resources. How's that for an answer?
Yeah, we're just like if two kids go to the exact same school for the exact same education, their intelligence is still different. Kindergarten, few grade, like they're
Yeah, no, it is totally different. And also the resources that they are given in order to develop based on their learning styles are different.
You mean the family giving them the resources?
Well, the public school system here is the resources are gauged based on your testing outcomes. So that if your family doesn't have resources to provide for you beyond what the system will provide for you, you don't have it. And guess what happens to kids who don't have resources to help them learn in the way that they need to? They don't learn.
That would imply all the kids going to the same school will come out approximately similar performance after school.
Well, no, it doesn't really, because they go into the school coming from family systems that are prepping them or not prepping them. We're supporting them or not supporting them. So, for instance, I remember my mother raging in my childhood because parents were having their kids show up to kindergarten and being able to read, which meant they sat at home and taught the child to read. And my mother resented it because she thought that it was unnecessary for children to learn how to read until 2 grades later, right? Shouldn't they have a childhood where they could just play? And wouldn't that make sense? And so then you look at a different school system, for instance, like the Japanese school system, the main curriculum is manners until you're 7 or 8 years old, and then you get into a different kind of curriculum there. But because we've set up this meritocracy where resources are given based on the outcomes of these tests that really only test whether you take the test well, it is a cascade of resources or nothing, really, is what happens. So no, I wouldn't say that. I would say it's more likely that the next Einstein is parking your car because of where he was born in the class system and the resources that were available to him. Then he wouldn't or she wouldn't be capable of understanding the nature of the universe.
Yeah, I think this is where karma comes in. That's what I believe in. But also, I think,
or injustice. How about that?
sorry, karma in the sense inclination of a kid, which he comes in this world with some pre-inclination towards something.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. It's a tough nut, that one. Oh.
Thanks, George. I actually want to first just mention, or maybe ask Christian, because Christian was trying to raise his hand a bit before I raised my electronic one. Christian, did you still have a question?
Say that again?
Christian was, I think, going to ask a question as well, but he was trying. He was physically raising his physical hand before I raised my electronic hand.
Christian.
Sorry, poor lighting in here. You're gonna be disappointed with what I have to say, but I had a job interview like 14 years ago or something, where they made me do some kind of IQ test, like Raven's progressive matrices, and then I didn't get the job, so it's like a double blow. Did not get a job by virtue, I assume, by virtue of failing an IQ test. Well, that was my question.
Okay, that was your comment. Yes, it is an interesting thing. I can also tell you this. If you score really high, that is to say you have a super high IQ on the test, but you are in a school where they don't provide resources for high achieving students because they don't expect them to be there based on the class of the people that go there, you will not be given the resources to develop your high IQ, and it will be of no advantage. That's just the way the system operates. But you will have a brilliant person to park your car. Paul.
Indeed, for a certain type of brilliance. Thanks, George. Maybe just a side commentary before my real question of, if you want to see if you're concerned about financial resources, look at Raj Chetty's work. He will convince you more than anyone else, other than maybe you, George, that your postcode where you're born has more impact on your financial well-being of the course of your life than anything else. It is the biggest single predictor.
Right.
And that is like some of the most, he spent 18, the guy's a genius, right? I mean, entered Harvard at 17, had his PhD by the age of 20 or something. It's a really smart guy in terms of academic credentials, but cares a lot. So he's mostly around like what's happening in preschools and public policy around it. Support kids. So that's Raj Chetty, R-A-J, Chetty. And then in terms of, and this is going to actually be a segue to my real question. But if you want to get a neuroscientist research side sense of the role of brain development and learning and the role of relationships. So our interest in brain development and learning in children and adolescents, certainly have a look at Mary Helen Immordino Yang's work, which the important thing, the salient thing to us in our context here, I think, is that the way that adolescent brains develop and kids really learn is when they interact with each other in dialogue about the meaning of what they're learning.
Right.
It literally leads to brain development. No great shocker to us, I would hope. But she was putting that stuff out 25 years ago, and so there's like the resource part. There's like the resource part also be like your community resources of like what are the attitudes, the worldviews and the attachment styles of your classmates. Makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Basically,
It does.
And on the infant side of that is Gretchen, I can't remember her name, neuroscientist out of Canada. The book name is Nurture, where she just points out that the main thing that makes infant brains develop is literally being physically nurtured by mother and other caregivers.
Right.
And that sets you up to be able to take advantage of the other things. And I'll just end on saying, like, I am an amazingly gifted bubble filler. It's the extent I've gotten anywhere in the world, including not living in my birth country anymore, is because I can fill out bubbles like no one else. I didn't go to school after age 7, and somehow the #1 ranked Ivy League school for the terminal degrees I have gave me 2 degrees because I could fill out bubbles like nobody's business.
Oh,
So just saying, with all of that said, you can still be left at home alone after age 9 by your parents all day, totally neglected, and still somehow come out. To your point, George, it's not my scholastic aptitude so much as like I had an aptitude for taking tests. I'm actually really good at it
right.
because I analyze the tests and see how they work, and I'm like, oh, now how the test works.
Nice.
It doesn't matter what the content is. I know how the test works now. Yeah. So sorry,
Nice.
this is all recorded for everyone's hopefully benefit and like actual benefit as well as the humorous benefit of it. My question, the reason I raised my hand, sorry I entered a little late, so maybe if you answered this, forgive me, in the way that you introduced the autobiographical childhood memory. I'm wondering if there's any, just for attachment or other relation interactions, is there any implications of having, or maybe even like traumatic events or something, implications of having much more, like childhood amnesia for me begins around age 2, as
Right.
opposed to most people around age 7 or 8 or something, right? And I have quite a collection of fairly clear memories that are verified by other people from about age 2 onward, including
And is
sibling
that a
interactions.
continuous flow of memories or just sporadic?
It's interesting you say that because I try to keep them alive, and so there's like a pretty continuous flow from about the age of 3.
Okay.
They're shadowy before the age of 2, but I have some like as early as like probably 18 or 19 months that are kind of shadow. Those are the sporadic ones. And I've partly posited this on, I was clinically dead at the age of 2, had a very severe physical trauma that had to be resuscitated from that, coupled with, I know that I was speaking and running at the age of 9 months, and my mother taught me to read before the age of 2. So I had a lot of linguistic ability, which might have been it, but I'm just sort of wondering, would there be some other component that, like, something about the relationships with my caregivers and something about, I did in fact die, but was resuscitated. Would that sort of do something to the brain where it would be actually tracking these autobiographical memories now in a way that might not otherwise happen for someone so young?
My understanding is it's associated with the sense of vigilance that the child needs to have, so that the
That would fit.
earlier the vigilance, the more likely you are to have those memories. But that before the normal range of memory, it's sporadic. That is to say, there are episodes that you remember, but it's not a kind of continuous memory.
Yeah, okay. Because I mean, again, I would say the continuous stuff still seems early to my reckoning.
But yeah,
like
and
3 or 4, but
probably within the curve, on the early
Yeah.
end of the curve. But the early
Yeah.
sporadic memories are mainly when the child has to be vigilant from a very early age.
okay, that got it. Thank you,
Mhm.
and thank you for entertaining my entertainment.
But are you okay? The so I think one of the things about attachment conditioning and recognizing attachment conditioning, understanding your own attachment conditioning, is once you get into the post puberty, into the 20s and the beginning of forming autonomous relationships that are extra to the family system, is you begin to notice these, particularly if you have more than one, these patterns of how they form and how they come apart. And then that's the thing to begin to look at in recognizing your own attachment conditioning, but also recognizing the attachment conditioning of who you are drawn to in terms of forming relationships. Once you get into your mid 30s or so, what you'll also notice is that the most commonly available person is on the dismissing end of things, because their relationships last the shortest, so they're more available than other people are. Secure people tend to meet and form long-lasting relationships, and they tend to couple for the first time for substantial periods in their 20s. And so the 20s is a period of secure people meeting and coupling for relationships that will carry them past the 20s, past the 30s, into the 40s, into their 40s. And so you'll notice in the beginning of the 20s, there were a lot more secure people available than there are toward the end of your 20s. If you're preoccupied, the most common person that you'll engage in a relationship with is a dismissing person. That's the second most common coupling. If you use the parameters of the whole society and the distribution, maybe 28 or 30% of the population is secure, 20% are dismissing, and 20% are preoccupied. And so that takes up 70% of the population, and then 30 or 32% are disorganized, which would be the third most common coupling, disorganized with disorganized. So what you recognize is the pattern of the person that you're drawn to and the dynamics of those relationships. And if you see in the other person that they're dismissing, you can reflect back on yourself as probably being preoccupied. Or if you're drawn to, or a preoccupied person is drawn to you, then it's likely that you are on the dismissing side of things. If you're disorganized and the person that you're drawn to is disorganized, then it's likely that you are also disorganized. Is that making sense? It's a shorthand. How do you tell if somebody's disorganized? They're unreliable. They have a lot of beginnings, some middles, and not many finishes. And in their narrative is the way that they describe the circumstances of your life. That's what you're going to hear. They also tend to begin to withdraw from pursuing actively relationships in their middle 30s because they're disappointed over and over again in relationships not working. And it is actually the disappointment that they begin to avoid entering into another attempt at forming a relationship and not really being able to understand exactly why it doesn't go well. And then the relationship becoming troubled and then actually disruptive often, to the point that it makes life harder rather than easier, and then withdrawing from the relationship. A dismissing person with a preoccupied person in the organized world can form long-lasting relationships. They're transactional, not intimate in the way that secure functioning relationships are. And what we really mean is the care is transactional. I'll do this for you if you do this for me. If you don't do this for me, I won't do that for you. Is a transactional nature. The secure, collaborative nature of relationship is I take on your care and take care of you in the way that you need to be taken care of. And you take on my care and you take care of me in the way that I need to be taken care of. It's very ordinary to encounter problems around that, particularly in insecure relationships. From the point of view, say, of a dismissing person, you take care of me and I give you stuff. That's how this relationship works. And I give you my demands and you take care of them. And and I allow you to be proximate to me. And that's the nature of the relationship. And if you don't like it, then you can go somewhere else. And the preoccupied person is willing to do that. It satisfies a few things for them. One is they feel emotionally regulated when the person that they regulate is regulated, because they displace their own emotional experience for the empathetic experience of the other person, and they don't explore well, and so it's much easier for them to operate in the world if somebody is telling them what it is that they're supposed to do, and then the reward follows for them doing it, so that the way that it's a kind of secondary exploration where they're given the task to do without having to generate the need to do it. They perform it, and then there's a reward at the end of it that has some value to them. Is that making sense? Disorganized people, the the thing about disorganized people is that social isolation is the way that they mainly regulate their emotions, so that they have to be in relationship to somebody who doesn't mind if they get dysregulated, that they don't show up without explanation. And really the only people that are willing to do that are dismissing people, because they don't care whether you show up or not, as long as when you do, you have the juice that they want. Or other disorganized people, because you get a pass for not showing up because they can't show up either. It doesn't make the relationship stable, it makes them quite volatile. But still, they're willing to be in relationship over time with you, because the not showing up piece isn't penalized in the same way. Who did?
George, you were talking about disorganized people when asked about the narrative about their life. There's this beginning, there's some middle and no end.
Many finishes, if any.
Yeah, and so that's not just for their life story, but any story, right? It could be their trip last week.
Right.
Literally anything that you're asking will not have a beginning, middle, and end.
Well, what you'll notice is a lot of beginnings. So if they're giving you a job history, it's a lot of jobs. But that didn't go that far, right? If you listen to my narrative, I have a very typical fearful, avoidant narrative. I ran a campaign office for a while. I was a systems analyst for a while. I worked in nightclubs for a while. What else did I do? I worked in sales for a while. I worked in administration in a college for a while. I mean, there's just these many different job things that happen. None of the, all maybe in the job category rather than in something that was more likely to lead somewhere. Is that making sense?
I don't think I understand this example. So you were asking about job history. This person is giving job history to you.
Well, if you listen to the narrative of somebody and, for instance, you focus on their job history, it's a lot of jobs that didn't go that far. A lot of different
Actual
jobs.
jobs didn't go that far.
Yeah. A lot of different companies, maybe is another way to put it. A lot of different kinds of jobs might be another way to think of it.
I thought you were saying the way that they describe anything doesn't have a continuity.
Oh, not necessarily the physical structure of the language that they use. Although it can be, when they're disorganized, that there's a lack of coherence. There's also, it depends on how frightened they are. You'll notice that in disorganized speech, they tend to like to leave a lot of exits. That is to say, they make the meaning ambiguous, so that if they sense that there's disapproval, they can pivot and make the meaning something else. They often have difficulty expressing themselves authentically, so they tell you what they want you to know, but it's in a puzzle, so that you have to work out the puzzle, so that they have a way of deflecting if if you're disapproving of what they want to say. It's rococo is in the way that they organize their speech. A lot of flourishes without any real substance a lot of the time. What are you trying to tell me? That's the thing that comes into your mind when you're listening to somebody who's disorganized. What are you actually trying to tell me? Because I can't figure it out.
I thought that was preoccupied also. Would tend to do a lot of.
Well, what you notice about preoccupied speech is that they leave out all of the natural spaces where you might respond, because it's just like a solid wall of words that's coming at you. And you would have to be impolite to break into the flow of words in order to reflect back. So we might even talk about it in terms of Grice's maxims. The volume of words violates quantity. They have a tendency to change the topic, change the agreed topic, which is the violation of relevancy. And the reason that they do that is that they want the attention to remain on them. And the way that they succeeded that is by continuously changing the topic until they land on a topic that only they can talk about. So once they've managed to do that, then they're the only person who can comment on it, because they're the only person who knows anything about it. That would feel like a successful maneuvering of the conversation, but what they would miss is that nobody else is interested in the topic. And then they lose the attention of the people that they're trying to hold the attention of. And it's confusing to them why they're losing the attention, not understanding that when you keep switching the agreed topic to something that only you can talk about, the reason that only you can talk about it is nobody else is interested in. Whereas if you had allowed it to stay on a topic that had general interest in the group, when your turn came and you could add something to it that was relevant to the group, the whole group would be interested. But because they're in pretend mode most of the time, they don't have genuine interests that they might use as a way of guiding that. So that's what you notice about them. There's a lot of different violations that they make. Crisis is a good way of understanding conversation and content. Dismissing people will hold the entire attention of the group, and they'll do it, but not in the way that preoccupied people do it. Preoccupied people do it by violating the consent of the group. And dismissing people license the group into giving them permission to dominate the conversation by making it more entertaining, by making it more interesting, by making it feel good to the people that are participating. So they engage in a kind of idealization where people feel intoxicated by the conversation that's happening, and give their permission for the dismissing person to take too much of the bandwidth. Is that making sense? So when you get around somebody who's really charismatic, of course, you cede your time to them so that they'll present themselves in a way that's very appealing to you, because it makes you feel good to be in that experience. But when you reflect back on it, you realize, of course, that they just juiced you. That is to say, they just stripped the psychic juice from you without you really having much control over or much participation in that happening. But it felt really good, which is the mastery of that kind of dismissing charisma, that idealizing charisma. Yeah, if you're with somebody and you feel totally intoxicated and completely drained, then you're likely hanging out with a dismissing person who's just like a succubus juicing you.
It's not about the quantity of words or the dismissive. They can also speak a lot, just with
Right. Yeah, totally. That it's not a violation of quantity because they've licensed it from you. You've given them permission to do it. Whereas the preoccupied person usually doesn't get permission to do it. They just take it.
like interfering.
Yeah. You'll notice in the sentence pattern, the first sentence is along the lines of the topic that's talked about. Then they make a break and introduce a new topic. And then if somebody else can contribute to it, they repeat the pattern until they land on one where nobody else knows anything. And then they pursue that topic. And there is you can, when you, what you'll notice is there's a group of people chatting. And then a preoccupied person enters the group because they want to be in that circle of attention. And a short time later, the group disbands. That from the outside, that's what it looks like. I think really all you have to do is say, let me look at what's happening here through the lens of attachment. See if I can begin to understand. The most rigid and easiest to identify is the dismissing person because they're the least flexible, the least mobile. The hardest one to track is the secure person because they're the most dynamic and the most adaptable and most flexible. The preoccupied person is the one that once they get a hold of the conversation, you have to pry the words apart to get any your ability to participate in it. And the dismissing, the disorganized persons on the avoidant end are absolutely the sweetest person you're likely to meet. But it's very hard to find much substance there, and the fearfully preoccupied people are usually demanding. And so they tend to be much harder to manage in terms of willingness to participate with them.
George, is there a book on this? How or is this on the attachment, the behavior-based stuff that you just talked about?
Pretty much any relational book that you can find will describe dismissing and preoccupied relationships. Like there is a book, I think the most popular book still is called Attached, and it describes basically preoccupied and dismissing attachment. It says that they don't discuss disorganized relationships because there's so few disorganized people. But what they really mean is disorganized people have no resources and they don't buy books. So why should we write a chapter on them?
Yeah, that book sucks.
I like the Wallen book because it has a chapter in the middle of it that describes the different attachment strategies, and that's pretty good. Dan's book describes is the best on disorganized attachment in terms of describing it, and then the relational dynamics between the groups. Secure people tend to go with secure people because they don't put up with not having that complete skill set. Dismissing people tend to go with helplessly preoccupied people or other dismissing people. They don't go with secure people because they don't reciprocate, and collaborative is the name of the game for secure people. They will even go with disorganized people, but they don't rely so much on those relationships because, and it doesn't matter to them that they're not reliable as long as when they show up. The David Wallen, Psychotherapy and Attachment, I think it's called, or Attachment in Psychotherapy. You might even read A General Theory of Love. I think that's pretty good, although it's 20 years old at least now.
I think maybe you should write a book on this also.
Oh, yes. Yeah. The preoccupied people can go with secure people. And often for them, it's even healing of attachment, because the secure person shows up so reliably, their preoccupation doesn't activate. But it can also be deleterious to the secure functioning person, because if they get caught up in pretend mode and they don't notice it for quite a long time, because the preoccupied person in pretend mode is pretending to be attached, they could walk out on the relationship, and it would be quite devastating to somebody who was actually attached to have attached to somebody that was only pretending to attach. So the preoccupied person would move on very rapidly, and the dismissing person would be quite bereft. Secure people won't be in relationships too much with disorganized people because they're not reliable. Dismissing people are totally happy to be in relationship to disorganized people as long as they show up with juice. Preoccupied people, organized preoccupied people tend to not want to be in relationship with disorganized people, because disorganized people would draw to regulate, and preoccupied people need proximity to regulate. Disorganized people fearful avoidant people tend to form relationships with either fearful avoidant or fearfully preoccupied people, or complexly disorganized people. And fearfully preoccupied people also tend to form relationships with dismissing people. Anybody who's empathetic has a hard time forming a relationship with a fearfully preoccupied person, because they're in tantrum mode most of the time, which is this very intense internal emotional state. And if you're empathetic at all, you can't deal with the intensity. But strongly dismissing people don't feel anything, and they're not empathetic, so it doesn't matter to them that you're in a tornado the whole time, as long as you provide for them what they want. Is that making sense? So why don't we do a little bit of practice? What would you like to do? Okay. Let go of the meditation. How's that? Good. So let's see. We started level 2 today on Thursday at 4:30 in the afternoon. If you want to join that, you still can. And then what's coming up? On the 12th, we're starting a new level 1, which is running for 3 Saturdays. The 12th, 18th, and then 26th, is it? No, 19th and 26th, yeah. I'm giving a talk on July 20th at Open Door Dharma, which is in Los Angeles. So every now and then I do something in person, and if you happen to be in Los Angeles and want to drop by, it's from noon to 1:30. What else we got coming up? I'm going to do level 1 addiction, which is on starting on Saturday, August 9th, for 3 Saturdays. So the 9th, the 16th, and the 23rd. I'm doing another Open Door Dharma on August 24th. Looking to see. And then I'm going to do the exploration series Saturday, the 13th of September, and then the 20th of September. And then the summer will be over, and we'll be into the fall. So if any of that's interesting to you, it's up on the website. Take a look at it. Really appreciate your practice. I'm glad you came. I offer the teaching freely, but if you're able to make a donation, I do appreciate it. It helps support me and also the work Mettagroup is doing. There's a link on the website to make a donation. Good to see you. Hope to see you soon. Bye.